Yeah.
So, George, what's your last name? I know it, but I don't want to butcher it.
You don't want to butcher it?
Yeah.
Kalafut.
Calafut.
Yes.
That's not that hard. So, George Kalafut, what's the brokerage you're with again?
Phyllis Brown and Company.
Phyllis Browning. So, George and I met through a networking group. Shout out to NIA.
Yep.
And he's been to, a couple of the barbecues now.
Mm-hmm.
Good times. This week, for the record, doing pork belly burn ends.
Nice.
And we're going to do a pork tenderloin as well. So keep the sweet with the pork belly burnt ends, and then the savory with the pork tenderloin. But this is your first time on
different.
the podcast, yeah?
Yeah, first time.
So typically for people who come on for the first time, we want to get to know you, know what you're up to. This podcast started as a real estate podcast, but then kind of evolved when we started bringing people from the trades on.
Yeah.
We kind of identified that real estate agents are self-employed business owners, right?
That is a fact.
Yeah. You don't think that when you get into real estate, but then all of a sudden you realize you're like, man, I'm kind of on my own. I got to put together a business budget, do all the things. And there are similarities to being a real estate agent and owning your own business. So we've had a lot of different business owners on here as well. So tell us how you got started. Tell us where you're from. Tell us all the things, man.
Well, we're from the same area.
Yeah.
Youngstown, Ohio.
Yeah. Cleveland and Youngstown right there.
Yeah, so it's got some Ohio guys here.
Yep. OH.
Yeah. But I did leave as soon as I could.
Yeah.
I'm guilty of that. So after college, I moved.
Not a
to
bad
Texas.
idea.
Yeah. I spent 10 years in commercial real estate,
Okay.
development and construction. That was what I enjoyed. That's what I went to college for, was construction management, actually.
Okay.
And so building things and designing was what I enjoyed to do. And I did that for a long time. And that's how I went from Houston, got to Austin, and then eventually decided I was ready to do my own business.
There it is.
And I had my real estate license for a number of years before. So it was a pretty logical transition and something that I wanted to do. So once the time came, I
made the leap.
Yep.
How long have you been doing the residential real estate stuff?
Full time, about 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's about the breaking point.
Yeah.
I talk to a lot of agents. They say that first couple years a little tough, but 3 years is usually the breaking point, and then you're kind of jamming out. 5 years you start getting repeat clients and all of that. So you find that to be true, or did you just hit the ground running?
I grinded hard at the beginning.
Right.
I was cold calling heavy.
Yeah.
So I was like, my goal was like, man, I got to figure out how to make money.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously I went and looked at all the different lead sources and how to do that. And I've never cold called a thing in my life.
Oh, okay.
And decided, that's what I'm going to do. So I did it. And while it was painful, it did work and allowed me to kind of hit the ground running and generate business relatively quickly. Now, to your point, what I'm seeing is that progression is everything's cold, first-time client, then you start getting referrals from those people, right? Because I was cold calling expired listings, and I still do to this day. But the great thing about that is they had their house for sale for a while and didn't work.
Yeah.
Didn't sell. And then when I'm able to meet with them and ultimately help them sell their home, deliver that result they're looking for, that goes over well and allows them to be happy and refer other
It's a good look.
friends. Yeah.
So the cold calling, I want to touch on it a little bit because I get phone calls a lot from agents, just kind of checking in, saying, hey, how's business? How's everything going? And it's no lie. I mean, it's been, I call it steady. It's been steady for a number of years, about 2.5 years. Mm-hmm. And every year when we get into a new year, I see, kind of some of the young real estate agents. They're like, all right, this is going to be the year. Mm-hmm. And then right around spring market, they're kind of either like, yeah, I'm jamming, or they're kind of like, man, this isn't really hitting as well as I want it to be. And that seems to be one of the conversations that I have with a lot of agents, is the reluctancy to cold call. The idea, I think, initially for most people that get into real estate, they kind of tell themselves, I'm just going to talk to friends and family and network. Like, I'm not cold calling. Like, that's not a thing. So I'm happy to hear that it's not something that you're totally against. I know the main objective is to eventually probably not have to do that ever again. However, I'll tell you, as someone with over 20 years experience, it ebbs and flows, man.
Yeah.
That cold calling it never stops. But yeah, to be just pounding the phone, making hundreds of phone calls a week is really, really rough. So I think that's just like a good tip though, just kind of letting agents know, like, look, there's no shame in, I mean, I think one of the things, or I know one of the things that I've said about real estate agents is I think a lot of them are sometimes confused that y'all are salespeople.
Yeah.
And I think for some agents, they're like, no, that's not true. It's like, no, you're selling homes, and if you're not, you're probably not going to be that successful. And you doing this for 3 years, so you got in right about when things were slowing
Oh,
down.
yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Perfect timing.
I think it is, and I'll tell you why.
Because you have to grind.
That's true.
Yeah.
I think it's perfect timing because what I see as these cycles turn is I see agents that either they get in a very good time and they do okay, right? Um, they do great maybe considering they just started, but in the grand scheme of things, it's okay. And then things get kind of tight, and a lot of them get really whiny, and they're like, this isn't what I signed up for. And some of them, power through it. But the ones that get in during the tough time, they're willing to grind up front and everything. And then when things turn, and they will, you'll be able to absolutely crush it, right? You're not going to leave money on the table, which anyone who started when times were easy will tell you. Looking back, they definitely left money on the table. It's not possible to do otherwise, right?
Right.
So now you're going to have your systems in place. You're going to have your experience all geared up because even though you had all the experience with commercial real estate, it's a little different.
It is.
And you're dealing with people versus businesses, and there's a little more caressing there.
That's a nuance that took a little while to get adjusted to, was the clientele base. But the other thing was, like, from a systems standpoint or the way transactions work, all very similar. The main challenge is, I have to go find the clients now.
Right.
Whereas, when you work at a company, they kind of come to you, which is what we talked about earlier, is a small business. You're responsible for finding your business. And if you don't realize that, call it a salesperson, whatever
you're gonna have a bad time.
Yeah. When the paychecks don't come in, you're going to realize quick if this is for you or not.
So you've got obviously coworkers, colleagues, people in the business. I mean, without naming any names, of course, like, what do you say to people who are kind of like, I don't want to do the cold calling, and I'm not, the numbers aren't there, right? Like, one of the lines that I say all the time is, numbers don't lie, people do, right? So I can have an agent that can tell me that they don't make their cold calls and that's not their thing and blah, blah, blah. And then when I pull their production, it's like, that's great. You closed like 2.5 million last year. What is your advice, or what are your thoughts when knowing those kind of metrics and numbers?
Yeah. So I was the number one agent in our office last year.
Congrats.
Thank you. So a lot of people do ask me that, like, what do you do? What do you, I see what they're doing versus what I'm doing. And my main question is, how many people are you talking to in a day?
Yeah.
I mean, that's ultimately what this all boils down to, is talking to people, whether it's cold, warm, in person, on the phone, doesn't really matter, but you have to be talking to people.
Yeah.
I see a lot of people, especially newer agents, they focus on all the nuance and the systems and building and learning and trainings, and they get a little apprehensive to go do things because they're so focused on, I don't know how to do any of the transactional work or the administrative work. But ultimately, it's like, focus all your time and effort on finding clients.
Right.
All the other stuff works out. I mean, there's plenty of ways to figure out how to get through it once you have a client.
You can't really work on a deal that you don't have.
Right.
Right.
You're worrying about problems that you don't even have.
Yeah.
Problem one, I have no business. I need to go find business. Solve that. You could very easily solve the rest of it.
That's one of the lines we hear on the podcast all the time is, and especially when it comes to buying homes, it's like, who buys homes? People buy homes. So how many people do you know? And I have those exact same conversations with agents, some of them that are slow, and it's a tough conversation when I'm like, well, what are you doing to get in front of people?
Yeah.
And I've had agents that are like, I don't have a lot of friends. I don't have any hobbies. Like, that's just not my thing. And I'm like, you might be in the wrong
Yeah.
business because don't get me wrong. Um, I know that if a client were to just raise their hand and say, hey, I want to buy or sell, that some of these agents they're going to do a great job.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But I've always said the difference between a real estate agent and an admin is really one thing. Because I know some admins that are probably better real estate agents when the transaction's actually there
Yeah.
than realtors themselves. But the one difference is one generates business and the other one doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes I think when someone's like, "Oh, I'm super detail oriented with contracts. I'm good at negotiating. I'm going to make sure that the client's going to have a great experience." It's like maybe you should just be an admin, right? But that one part that I'm really bad at is, just getting new business. It's
Yeah.
like that's what a real estate agent does,
You're afraid to ask for business.
right?
Mm-hmm.
You're right. Yeah, that's a good point. You see a lot of that because people, again, I think the term that comes to mind is like, I don't want to be too salesy,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's like you're a salesperson,
Yeah.
and I know that there's like a finesse to that and all of it, but bottom line is like, keep it real.
That's your job.
Yeah, that's your job.
Or you don't have a job.
Right. Well, you have a title.
Yeah. Right.
You don't have a paycheck. I wanted to back up a little bit and ask you a little bit about the difference in regards to clients when it comes to commercial real estate versus residential. You said that there was, a little bit of a transition there, and I think it'd be good, just for agents that maybe are thinking, oh, well, can I dabble in the commercial
Mhm.
space? Like, with you having the experience, what are those differences?
It's a great question. Main difference is you're talking more to lawyers. You're talking more to people that raise money. But ultimately, I think the biggest difference is it's very black and white. Do the numbers work or do they not? There's not a whole lot of very little emotion involved with it. It's does it work or does it not? Can we make money or can we not?
Mm-hmm.
With residential, there's a whole gambit of reasons why they're selling. Money I came into and I was really, I would be sitting down with sellers and be seeing the numbers. I'm like, this is a great thing. Like we should be doing this. But there was other reasons or emotions or things involved that prevented them from doing at least what I thought they should do.
Right.
Um, so that adjustment is what took a little while to get used to. Is like it's not always about the numbers. There's a lot of other factors involved with it, and understanding and asking the right questions. So the questions you ask need to be different, pointed different to get different information out of it, so you could really understand what are we trying to solve here, or what are we trying to accomplish. Might not just be sell my house and make a lot of money. Might
Yeah.
be needing to move somewhere for a particular reason, someone's sick, whatever it is, you know.
So I know for some people, thinking about the idea of it being just about the numbers is exciting. I mean, what are your thoughts? What's the downside to that? I mean, what made you kind of get away from it?
So I guess I don't know that there's a downside.
Okay.
Um, I'm a pretty logical thinker, so
Mhm.
it works for me. I will say with residential and working with individuals and homeowners, there's a lot more appreciation. So
Okay.
with the emotion, sometimes the decision making's I can't quite wrap my head around, but
Sure.
when you solve the problem, there's a lot more gratification.
Okay.
They're a lot more happy versus in commercial, it's like, yeah, that was what we were supposed. That
Congrats,
was
you
the
did your
plan.
job.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. You
got it.
did your job. Thank you.
Little
Handshake.
little thankless.
Yeah.
Understood. So the real estate side of things is a little just exciting, kind of more of an attaboy, feeling to feel good.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
And they're much longer durations.
Okay.
So, you might work with one client for a considerable amount of time, where residential typically is much quicker.
Mhm.
So,
I gotcha. So commercial real estate for anyone who's watching this right now, thinking, "Oh, well, maybe that's what I should be dabbling in." I love the black and white. Remember why you got into real estate to begin with, and then I think the other piece of it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the amount of time that's associated with identifying and closing a commercial real estate transaction is probably like 3 to 4 times the length of a residential deal. I mean,
Yep.
am I right with that?
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Because everybody looks at the bigger price tag and goes, okay, commercial might be my thing, but
It might be one you work on for 2 years.
gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. So,
Especially if it's a development, because I was in development. So
okay.
So we would get in when we were contemplating what land we were going to buy, because I started off as an analyst and studying land, and eventually got into construction side of it and design.
Hmm.
So, I mean, you get in when you're sourcing land, I mean, you're 3 years, possibly longer, before that is done and ready to either lease out or sell, whatever it's going to be.
Gotcha. Anything about it that you miss?
Yeah, I do. I really enjoy designing and building
Okay.
things. That's
I mean, is there any part of you that wants to get back to doing the commercial stuff, or is that in the past?
no, I mean, I'm definitely on a path to begin building
Okay.
again. I'm probably going to start with some smaller residential townhome type development things. I'm and see where that goes from there. So I'm
Right
definitely
on.
on the path to get back to building because that's what I really enjoy. But one thing I learned is it takes so much momentum just to get in anything you do. It takes a lot of momentum and time to build that up.
Sure.
So that's where I'm at, is finally kind of seeing that momentum and effort paying off. So I'm riding that wave and building this up before I really consider doing something else.
Well, I've got high hopes, and I think the rest of us in the business do, that the longer this downturn, if you will, continues, the more pent up demand we have, and the crazier the market's going to end up being. And I look forward to another little wave. I don't think it's going to be anything like we saw in 2020, but this is technically my fourth economic downturn, and it is by far the longest one. I mean, we saw interest rates start to rise in March of 2022, and here we are in, almost May of 2025. So usually these downturns, they last anywhere between like as short as like 6 to 8 months to maybe a year, 18 months.
Right.
I mean, to have something that we've seen like this for 2.5 years is pretty, I've never seen it. You can study charts and stuff, and I guess, we had a really long downturn in the 80s, but man, I am over it. And I'm looking forward to being really, really busy again. But then I think about it and I'm like, is it possible that I was just so busy from really almost like 2018 all the way to 2021 that I got so used to being busy that like being steady is slow? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you get so used to a certain pace that like, when you're normal, if you will, whatever that is.
What is normal?
Right.
If you're busy for 5 years straight, well, that's
Yeah.
normal.
Well, and so to your point, it sounds like you got something built. Predictions are saying that we're probably going to see stuff really start to take off in 26, and that 27 is going to be a really good year as well. But we're going to have to really power through the vast majority of 25 here. But keeping those systems in place and doing what you're doing, obviously you'll reap the benefits of all of that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it also comes down to, and this is, we were talking earlier about cold calling and what other people do. I think it's important to have multiple streams of lead generation. So ideally you have a full pipeline. You have business 3 months, 6 months, all year, going into next year. So that way you have a real pipeline, which takes a while to build. It might take two years to kind of build out a pipeline, but once you have that, you can start having some predictability and establishing goals and understanding, okay, where am I going to be this year? What does this year look like? And your business planning kind of starts to come together in a more predictable manner, which is, I think, very important when we're running a business.
Totally. Do you is there anything you do as far as like scheduling or blocks? I talked to tons of different agents and obviously business owners. Is there a formula to it, or are you just constantly, kind of looking at what you've got going on and you're like, okay, I think I need to do a little bit more of this and that, or
Wish I had that figured out.
okay.
Yeah. I mean, I spend the weekend kind of looking at what I think my week's going to be. But in real estate, like I had 2 appointments this week that weren't on my schedule on the weekend. So that obviously changes things.
Sure.
But I try to put a baseline together, and then each evening I'm like, all right, what's tomorrow going to look like? When am I going to work? When am I going to talk to people? And just kind of put some high level points in there, so I at least have a structure to the day and have my main things that need to get done.
And are you one of the types that goes into an office or anything like that, or do you work from home? What's that look like?
I'm pretty split. I
Okay.
do both.
I think that's good. I typically find the majority of agents that don't go into the office. There's outliers, but a lot of them, they're like, "Oh no, I work from home," and then again,
It reflects.
the numbers reflect. Yeah,
And even if I'm not at home, I'm somewhere. Like I like
sure.
if I can Mondays, I try to stay at home and kind of make it a real focused day,
Hmm.
and then throughout the rest of the week, it really doesn't matter.
I got you. Um, so we talked about the cold calling. We talked
Mhm.
about getting in front of people and everything like that. Are there any other sources that generate new business for you that other agents might not be aware of, or they might be aware of them, but they think they're a waste of time?
I did a lot. Like I did social media
Hmm.
ads, or yeah, social media ads, and tried a lot of different
So
things.
you've invested money back into your business.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
Let's talk about that,
Okay.
because that is another thing that is always mind blowing to me. I'll give the short story that I've given to many agents is that, here we are. Let's just say Easter was last week. So you're sitting around at Easter and, if you kind of went ding, 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 I have an announcement to make. Um, I'm becoming a HVAC tech. I went to the bank. I took out a loan for $30,000. I bought a used work truck and all the equipment that I need, and I am going to start doing HVAC as a business. People would be like, "That's awesome. We wish you the best of luck, and crush it."
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
If you did the same thing and went ding, 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 I passed my real estate course. I took out a loan for $30,000. I'm going to be investing in leads and software, and I'm going to need a few things in regards to computers and whatnot. But I'm going to take that $30,000. I'm going to make a real run at real estate. People would be like, "What do you need 30 grand for?
Mm,
Are you out of your mind?"
it's a great point.
Right? It's
Yeah.
one of the only businesses that when you start it, people are like, "Oh yeah, I can just do this with no money whatsoever."
Hmm.
And I have found, one of the things that I've done as a lender is we've helped agents with lead shares or we've helped agents with coaching. There's a lot of different things that we have done to financially invest with agents to make them more successful because truthfully, real estate agents' success mirrors mine.
Mm.
Um, but you have these conversations and you speak to some agents that are like, "No, I'm not spending any money," and then they even double down and they close transactions and they take that money and they don't reinvest it into their business. And I see very few real estate agents that don't invest back into their business that do very well. And even if they do, it takes years. The ones that I give an example to are like the what I call like the real estate housewives. They seem to make it work after like 5 to 7 years, and
Hmm.
things they just sell homes and it happens. But it's really tough to like not sell homes for the first 3 to 5 years. But if you are a stay-at-home mom and all the bills are paid, then it's doable,
Right.
right? So I'm happy to hear that you're reinvesting back into your business. What are your thoughts about everything I just kind of covered? As far as you said you have agents that come to you. How many agents do you know that when you're like, "Hey, maybe you should close a deal and instead of spending all your money, you should take some of it and reinvest?"
Yeah. Well, so I mean, what you said was a great point. And if you're not doing those things, I don't know that you have a real estate business.
Hmm.
You're a real estate agent who
Right.
does some deals. But my whole thing was I wanted to structure and operate like an actual business does.
Hmm.
And one, what is one of the main reasons small businesses fail? They're generally undercapitalized
Yeah.
and run out of money. And so if you're not putting money back into your business when you don't have money to spend and it's just coming out of your living expenses, I mean, that's going to pose a problem. And that's when you have to go get another job or something else. So you have to invest in your business. Every real business has an operating budget. They have money that every time they make money, they pull a percentage out of it and put it into the business for growth, marketing, whatever it is.
Right. Overhead.
Why would you not do the same? Like, why are you modeling your business in a completely different way than 99% of every other business?
I think that's a great question. What would your response to that question be? Because I know what mine is.
What is the question of why would you not do that?
Right. What's keeping you from treating your business as a business that needs normal operating expenses and everything along those lines? Like what do you think the reason behind that is?
I don't know. I mean, my thought is just not spending any time in the corporate world to really understand how companies and organizations work. I spent 10 years there,
Mm-hmm.
watched how companies work and where the money was going. And when I left, that just was what I was going to do. Was not going
Sure.
to change. If it worked for that company, I'm not going to do something completely different that I don't know.
So
Maybe
how is it that people go out, get their real estate license, start with the brokerage, and no one explains this to them?
why don't we have a class on that
Yeah.
when you get your license?
No,
How to
literally.
run a business.
So here's my theory. I think a lot of it has to do with recruiting and downlines and all of that, because I think it's one of the, things that hurts agents when, you've got a lot of agents out there that are heavy into social media. They make their job look easy. They make their job look fun, and they make it look like anyone can do it. And then when someone's like, I want to be a real estate agent, maybe I could do that. I find that there are not enough agents that are saying, look, this is not as easy as it seems. It's going to be, it's going to be hard work, which then people are like, I'm not afraid of hard work. And I would say, you're going to need an initial investment, just like you would need in any business,
Yeah.
even if it's just to pay your bills,
Right.
right? Forget about even if I would argue you need money to pay your bills along with a marketing budget. So, even if you're spending a couple $1,000s a month for a marketing budget, average rent in Austin, I think, is $2,000, car payment around $500-700.
Yep.
I mean, you basically need an overhead burn rate of about $6 to $10,000 a month, and probably at least 90 to 120 days to get going. So why is it that agents and other brokerages don't sit down with real estate agents and be like, do you have 60 grand? Well, I'll tell you why. Because then they don't get an agent and they don't get somebody out there waving their banner for their brokerage.
Yep.
And let's face it, if the person goes out there and knows people and like does all the things, great, everybody wins. And if they don't, the only person who loses is the agent.
Yeah.
And I feel like in general, I know it's just business, air quotes, but I feel like in general, like it might not be a bad play if brokerages and real estate agents were a little more honest about what it takes to really, do what it takes to be in real estate, and talk about that. Like, you heard my HVAC argument. I used the number of 30,000. I
Yeah.
think you better have at least 30,000, at least if you're going to start real estate from scratch.
Mm-hmm. Well, you have a great point. And sometimes when people say, everybody seems to have an aspiration for real estate when you're talking about it, right?
Sure.
And
It's the only thing everyone knows everything about.
right. So how many people, you probably get the same thing, like, oh, I was thinking about getting my license. My answer is usually like, why? Why would
Yeah.
you do that?
Because I want more flexibility,
Yeah.
George.
Don't get your license. Stay where you're at.
I want to be able to go to my children's recitals, George.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's usually the response I get.
Mm-hmm. Flexible
Yeah.
schedules. Yeah.
Well, it's like that. What's the word? Like like an oxymoron almost. Where I always have noticed that the person who says to me like, I'm so sick and tired of like having a boss and being told what to do and working like a 9 to 5 job, and I want the flexibility and this and that. Like the person who says that usually is the one who needs that structure, right? They're the ones that need the structure, because then once they get out and then they have their own schedule, their day starts at 10 and ends at 3.
Yeah, I have the flexibility to decide how much chaos I want to bring into my day.
Yeah.
But there's going to be a lot of it.
I've always said 10 to 3 is the typical average real estate. Those are your business hours. Your average real estate agent works from 10 to 3.
Mm-hmm. Must be nice.
Now that I've said that, you'll start to notice it, because it's like day doesn't start at 9. There's usually the gym and some other things that are involved. It's not like they're just getting out of bed, but 10 to 3 is the actual work timeline. But yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts about obviously with you being number one in the brokerage, I would envision that they're hollering at you about maybe getting up in front of the group and pitching tips and tricks and everything like that. What are your thoughts on getting up there and talking about how a P&L works?
I hope it wouldn't go over everyone's head, but
It'd be fucking terrifying if it did, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that is
I like to help people, especially
sure.
people in my in my brokerage, and I see what they're doing. I want them to succeed as well.
Hmm. So
Point blank. If you're already in the space, let's figure out how to make it work for you.
and so what seems to be though the big obstacles? I mean, again, um, you've got that unique opportunity to have conversations with agents that are coming to you. You know it works,
Hmm.
because you're doing it. So what seems to be the big obstacle outside of, we kind of covered the budgeting aspect of it.
Hmm.
Are there any other things that you see when someone comes to you and says, George, here's my problems, like help me? And you're like,
Well, you could do that, but do they do it right?
right.
I mean, the things again, you go back to it's very glorified and glamorized, this business. It's
Hmm.
really not.
No, it's
I mean, I don't know. A lot of people make videos, house tours. Maybe that works for them. I don't. It's not something I really focus my time on.
hmm
But you know, is that working for you? How long have you been doing this? 6 months? Well, I think you should see some return after 6 months of doing
for
something.
sure.
If it's not, maybe you got to do something else. But at least I personally, when I was doing exploring things, I try to give at least a 3 to 6 month window to see does this produce results. Because number one, you got to figure it out. You got to get good at it. There's a learning curve, and then once you're good at it, is it doing what it's supposed to? And if it's not, well, I'm not going to do it, especially if it costs money.
Is there anything specific that, again, thinking of the agent who's coming to you for advice and they kind of tell you what they're doing, is it always just that they're not doing the things, or is there, because I can tell you for my business, it's usually just like, well, you're just not doing it.
Right.
Right. I mean, it's literally just that simple. It's you're not doing it. And then my big pet peeve is the line, that's just not my thing. You mentioned
Hmm.
like a house tour, for example. If I, not that we do them, but hypothetically, if I were to say, well, I do a house tour once a month, and I typically get branding out of it and everything. I hate it when I give someone advice and as far as what's working, and they go,
Nah.
yeah, but that's not my thing.
Hmm.
It's like, oh, okay. Well, what is your thing?
They
And
usually
how,
don't have a thing.
right? It's like, and how is that working for you? Is that kind of how the conversation goes, or is it maybe there really are just agents out there that are just confused and don't know what to do, and you give them a few pieces of advice, and they're like, hell yeah, I'm gonna go implement that? Like, what's it
I
normally
think
look
there's
like?
two things.
Okay,
One, there's so many different. I mean, there's so many different things in real estate. If you log onto social media, it's just constantly coming at you. You could do this, leads here, this, that, and
sure.
it just kind of gets scattered, and nobody really focuses enough time on one thing to get good at it and see the result from it. So you don't put enough time into one thing to get good at it.
Gotcha.
And
That's why you
that's
mentioned the
the
like 3 month thing.
yeah, the focus, like focus on one thing, get good at it, do it, see the result. And I'm pretty sure if you really focus your time and energy on something, you can make almost anything work. Just how much. The other thing is people are comfortable and like don't want to put in the effort to do some things. I mean, like I drive all around town all day.
Right.
Traffic, sitting in traffic, driving 2 hours, 3 hours a day is just a normal day. Going from the north side, south side, we're in NIA. We have meetings
Yep.
in Round Rock, Buda, all over the place. Well, I go to those. It's a lot of driving, but what am I trying to do? Build relationships with people,
Right.
talk to people like you, do things like this so that I'm at least out there communicating what I do. So when there is a need or something, people remember me. And if you're not talking and putting spreading your brand out there, well, people aren't going to know to call you. It's no secret that like being top of mind is like very important.
Sure.
So, what are you doing to be top of mind to as many people as you know?
Well, and I think the rebuttal to that I get a lot, and it's, in my opinion, a silly one, but I'm gonna, put it out there, is yeah, that's all great, but like none of that is going to yield me anything in the next 60 to 90 days. And therefore, like I don't have 60 to 90 days. Um, and I hate when I hear that, because what's funny is that when I look back, or better yet, when someone says, hey, you're having like a really great month this month, where did all these transactions come from? I link most of them back to activities that I was doing 4, 5, 6 months
Hmm.
prior. And and that same agent, will follow up with them like 6 months later and say, hey, how's everything going? Oh, I'm still slow. And it's like, well, think about if you would have just implemented some of the things that you said you had no time to wait for.
Yeah.
You're still here 6 months later, but we're in the same space because, you refused to do any of these activities that weren't going to yield you a sale in the next 30 to 60 days. And I think that's a big problem with a lot of stuff. Like, just a very small example is like everybody that's a past client of mine gets a handwritten birthday card. I write like 10 to 15 cards every single day, right? And there are times when I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. I should have someone else writing these, right? Or like maybe no one cares. But lo and behold, I mean, I had a transaction that I'm closing next week that was, they were like, you know what? We saw your birthday card. We kind of, we get your emails and stuff like that, but we were purchasing, and they kind of admitted like they were thinking of just going to the local bank, and this birthday card comes in. They're like, holy shit, there's Matt. We got to call him, and we're doing the transaction. And it was a birthday card that I sent like 6 months ago. And if I were to say to people like, hey, do a handwritten birthday card to every one of your past clients, which again, 22 years in the business, I've got about 6,000 past clients. So I write a lot of freaking cards. And dude, no joke. And, people are like, oh, that's a waste of time. And it's just, it's an example of like, you're never going to write a birthday card. And then all of a sudden, ring, ring, ring. Like, hey, I got your birthday card yesterday. Let me do.
It made me want to buy a house.
Right, right. So yeah, it's like all of these little activities that add up. So I hear you.
That's building out your pipeline. That's keeping in front of people. You don't know when someone's going to do something, but if you're at least communicating with them a couple times a year, especially past clients, it'll work.
Do you have any aspirations to, like mentor, build a team, or anything along those lines?
I've been floating the idea around.
Yeah. I mean,
at first it was no.
Right. But, well, I mean, you had to. What do they say? You have to fill up your own cup first.
Yeah.
Right.
I've been thinking about kicking the idea around this year.
I think one thing that I am also thinking about hiring someone here. At one point in time, we got up to like 12 employees and everything along those lines. And of course,
on your team.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
With things ebb and flow, right? And so with things slowing down, we've gotten a little smaller. But I'm thinking about hiring someone new again, and for outside of obvious reasons. One of the things that I've always identified is when I have somebody that is like that I'm mentoring, it definitely like helps sharpen my skills, because now I'm answering questions that I already know the answer to, but I don't really think through it. I just do it. And when someone else is asking questions and I'm like walking them through the why behind the question, I think it's a great way to really make you better at your job. And I think we forget as professionals, especially when, you've kind of, got the majority of it figured out, like you can always be better.
It makes you be a role model.
Yeah.
Like now you're like, okay, I have to do the things that I say we do and just be your best version.
Yep.
Because now other people are looking at you.
Exactly. Well, and again, if things, if the crystal ball is correct and things start to pick up here about this time next year, it'd be a great opportunity to maybe pick up a new rep and stuff like that. So
I think it would be.
Yeah. Well, that's what the real estate barbecue and mingle is all about. There's the shameless plug right there. Come in, meet agents. You never know who you're going to connect with that might a year from now say, damn it, George, you really got your shit together and I need structure. Yeah.
What you just said is like one of my favorite things that I tell myself, because there's been plenty of times where I'm at home and there's an event going on and I might have to drive an hour and it's going to be traffic. And I really don't want to go. I've already had a day. And I'm like, but you never know who I might meet there.
Yep.
Could change my life.
It's true.
So, or the person that I meet there who introduces me to the next person.
Exactly. And then what else? What else are you going to do anyway?
Yeah.
That's what I tell myself, at least. I'm like, what else am I going to do anyway? I'm going to watch Netflix or like, do something that isn't any sort of money-making activity. And, we all try to convince ourselves we're tired and we have stuff to do. No, you don't. No, you don't.
I could find something to do, but do I really need to do that? Yeah.
So with all this driving and everything, what do you do to kill the time? Are we doing audiobooks? Are we listening to podcasts? Do we just jam out to the radio? Bob FM. What's going on in your car while you're driving around everywhere?
I like silence.
Is that right?
Yeah.
You are not the first real estate agent to say that.
Yeah.
I don't drive as much as a real estate agent, but I definitely drive more than the average person just being in sales, and I do not like silence. And yeah, I hear a lot that are like, yeah, I'll just literally just drive.
Mhm.
Okay, psycho.
I mean, a lot of phone calls too.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a great time to just hammer out
For
phone
sure.
calls, follow up stuff, as well as doing on the way here, or silence.
yeah.
It's powerful. Let
Again,
me think.
I'm starting to think I'm the outlier in this because the majority of the agents I ask this question, they're like, silence, man. Silence and phone calls. Some of them are big podcasters, some of them are big audiobook people, but mainly silence and phone calls.
And I go through phases. I mean, I do. Audible would be my probably number 2.
You got any good books that you've listened to? Anything worth giving a shout out to?
Yeah, I read a book called 7 Levels of Communication.
Okay.
By Michael Mayer.
All right.
Shout out, Michael. Loved. I listened to it 3 times in a row.
No way.
Yeah, I loved it.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, it's all about building relationships and
Mhm.
running business through relationships, and really just being a generous person and being a person that is kind and, again, generous and someone that people like and want to do business with or want to just be friends with.
Kind of a giver's gain mentality thing.
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah, and I just went to. He had a conference in Atlanta at the end of March that I went to. It's really great.
From a sales standpoint, I typically tell people, everybody knows that like networking and getting referrals and everything along those lines is like best practices, but I think we forget the reason why. And I ask people, I'm like, why do you think that's the best, lead or this and that? And everybody kind of gives these like bullshit roundabout answers. And I just cut right to the chase. And I'm like, look, I think that what is important to understand, because you could purchase leads, right? I mean, that's an option,
You do it.
right? But when you are getting referred a piece of business, that means that someone else is basically like selling for you on their behalf, right? And that lead typically is like the best, how do I say this? Like path of least resistance to you getting a sale, right? And profit's not a dirty word, and so that's okay. And I think that we forget because, again, when we like mention networking to people and whatnot, people are like, oh, I hate networking and this and that. And it's like, why would you not want to generate the highest quality lead? And like, for lack of, this is a dirty word, but like almost like a lay down, right? Like, why wouldn't you want that? And I don't think that there is any way to generate more of a, easier transaction than through networking. Because like, even friends and family are probably going to be a more difficult transaction than a referral from like a someone who's either done business with them or like a B2B referral.
Family's going to beat you up.
For sure. Friends too. And, that's the one thing that I'll just never understand because the downside, in my opinion, of the networking and like the referral is they're definitely fewer and far between. Because I can just go spend a couple $1,000s and I can make my phone ring. Right. But that transaction is going to be difficult. But it's instant.
You're starting with zero trust.
Right.
Zero relationship, nothing.
Exactly.
It's cold.
Right.
So to your point, the first 5-6 listings I ever got were through cold calling, expireds. And then this miracle happened, and I had a referral come to me.
Boom.
So I'm going to this appointment with the same mentality I had always done with expireds, which is like not the best. I mean, they're not that happy. They're very skeptical of you. They received like 2,000 cold calls from other realtors. Somehow they picked you to come to their house. So it's like, okay, great. I really have to be on point and have to tell them all the great things we're going to do and how we're going to get the job done. And then so I go to this appointment and I start talking. He's like, okay, so when are we going to list it?
Right.
Like,
this is the referral.
Yeah, the referral. When are we going to list it? I'm like, what? You want to list it already?
Right.
He's like, yeah. I was like, okay. And that just kind of changed my whole thought process. I was like, I want more of those.
Right. So why not
Yeah.
spend more time cultivating those, even though that they are, you know, fewer and far between? You know, as salespeople, we talk about the whole like pipe dream mentality, right?
Mhm.
Like I would rather have 5 referrals in my pipeline than 100 just like people that I got through like cold calls that are,
Mhm.
you know, again, to your point, like the moment they find that property, they're going to say, okay, well, where are your rates and what's this? And, you know, I'm contacting 900 lenders and nothing matters to me but the price. It's like, yeah.
Mhm.
And,
And they'll trade you out
right,
with no remorse,
right.
no loyalty, and ultimately this whole thing works because there's trust, because there's some form of loyalty, which is what our agreements are supposed to do. But that's a paper agreement. There's
Sure.
not a real relationship to it, and if that's missing, it's not as pleasurable of an
For
experience.
anyone.
Yeah.
For anyone. I mean, that's the other thing that I always think about when I get some of these like super shoppers, and I'm sure you know, you have them
Hmm.
too. It's like, don't you want to work with someone that you like? Don't you want to have like a good experience with this? Like, what are we talking about here? $500,000? Like, and people that are like, no, I mean, that's really what it's all about. I'm like, I feel sorry for you.
Yeah.
I do. I feel sorry for people like that. I don't get it. Um, but you know, to as far as the client is concerned, one of the questions that I always ask, and this doesn't mean that you only want to work with this type of client, but what's kind of your ideal client? Do you have like a certain type? Do you prefer listings over buy side? What does that look like?
Hmm. Yeah, I'm probably 70-30 on listings.
Okay.
So primarily my business is built on listings, which is somewhat intentional. I still work with buyers. Um, my ideal client, honestly, is just someone who's practical, someone who's willing to uh, appreciate that I do this for a profession.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I come to them, and the things that we're talking about and reviewing are based off of data and my experience. You know, I have listings all throughout the city. So what they're getting is like, hey, here's data, and
Right.
here's also what I'm seeing every day. These
Yeah.
are the kind of calls I'm getting. This is what buyers are looking for. This is why I'm recommending we do what we do. Not because I made it up, because this is real time information for you. People that can value that and appreciate it is ideally who I like to work with. Of course, the opposite are the people that feel like they know everything because they sold a house 10 years ago and they they've been through it before, right? So they
Right.
want to kind of take control, and that's fine, but ultimately you have to remember, like, I do this every single day. I think I do it well, and I would like for that person to recognize that.
What's that? What what is that interaction like when you're sitting down with the client and you are basically presenting data um, that is not supporting what they think, you know, their house is worth, for example? Is the argument more like, well, your data's not right? Or is it more like, well, let's just see what happens?
I think there's a fine line that you got to walk there.
Okay.
Um, I don't ever like to tell somebody something, right?
Hmm.
I want to try to get to that
Sure.
conclusion together, ideally, um, because I don't want to come off as arrogant or
Right. Of
anything
course.
like that. But ultimately, the data's not going to lie, right? If your home's not priced within a certain range, it's probably not going to sell.
Hmm.
How do we get them to realize that? And sometimes people are just let me say this. I see it most for people that are in a position that bought in the past couple years and their equity is kind of at risk because values have come down and they're just like, this is where I have to be.
Hmm.
Well, okay, I get that. There's not really much you can do in that case,
Yeah.
right? They bought high, prices came down, and there's not a lot of wiggle room there. It's a different scenario. Most people that have some equity, we could get to a pretty good, reasonable understanding just by looking at what sold, what didn't sell, what are they looking to achieve? And that's why you have to ask a lot of questions and really probe what we're doing and kind of get them to the conclusion on their own. To get there, this is where we need to be. Because ultimately, in my opinion, pricing is the most important piece of the whole puzzle.
Yeah. Typically, most agents I talk to, and I think this is kind of a rule of thumb, is that if you're going to buy a property, you pretty much have to hold on to that home for at least 3 years, ideally more like 5 years, to really put yourself in a position to where you're not going to be disappointed when you go to sell.
Mm-hmm.
So with you being mainly listing heavy, what is the why behind people that are selling under that like 5-year range right now? I mean, you're on the front lines.
Mm-hmm.
The client who bought, say, in 2022, why is he selling, or why are they selling right now?
Most of the people that I have, and this is what's interesting, almost every listing I'm having right now is because they're relocating somewhere to go to work.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. And so they're not even moving within the city. They're moving outside. And I think it's a lot of people that
Is this an industry specific? Is it like tech? Is it
tech and medical, I'm
okay?
seeing. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So you got a lot of tech and a lot of medical leaving the Austin area that just recently purchased, and then they're moving. Is there a common city that they're all moving to or
Mm-hmm.
area? No, just all over the place. That is interesting.
Mm-hmm. Or they're just moving back home they moved here during the pandemic era and they're moving back to wherever they came from.
So we're seeing like a reset with.
I am. I can't say
No, I mean,
but like that's what I'm seeing.
sure.
Yeah.
No, I get that. I like it. I mean, but that's super interesting to me because again, anytime I talk to anybody, I come in as, with a very consulting approach. And that is one thing that I typically will tell anyone is like, look, if you're buying this house and you're not going to stay in it for 3 to 5 years, like you need to very seriously reconsider what you're doing or be prepared that you might end up losing money.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're okay with that, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Then we can move forward. But I'm hearing from a lot of agents that they're having these listing consultations with people that are selling who purchased in 21, 22, 23. And I'm thinking, who told them that was a good idea then?
Yeah.
Right? But I guess if you're moving for a better opportunity, that makes sense. And what's keeping them from renting the property?
Moving out of state. Not really.
They
A lot of
don't
people don't have the appetite for that.
I don't. I'll be the first to admit it.
Especially if I was moving out of state.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously that's something we talk about and look at because
Mhm.
if they're going to have to bring cash to closing,
Yep.
most people don't want to do that, especially because they're going to go buy something on the other end. I don't know that renting's that easy right now either.
Yeah.
A lot of the people who haven't sold their home are renting right now.
Mhm.
Like I said, I call expireds every single morning. A lot of them are renting their home.
Okay.
So they've got their mind made up, we're going to rent it. And now I'm looking at the rental market. I'm like, I don't know that that's going to be a whole lot better for you.
Yeah, I saw a
Prices have
statistic
come
that
down too.
rents are at like an all-time low right
Yeah.
now.
So, and those people probably aren't renting. The red spread isn't there.
Yeah.
Spread is not there. So
They're losing money
Yes,
still,
yes.
just not as much as if
Not
they
as
just
much.
cut the bleeding.
Mm-hmm. Now, I
Interesting.
will say there's a couple other scenarios that I could think of. Retirement age people
Mhm.
whose kids don't live here anymore, and they want to just go wherever their kids are.
Okay.
And now those are the people who I would say have a higher motivation because they're in retirement and they're like, hey, we're not going to wait around here for the market to pick up. We want to.
Mhm.
This is what we want to do. We're in our 60s or
Yeah,
maybe
they're
their
expiring.
70s. Yeah, they're expiring.
Pun intended.
So they're like, this is what we're going to do, and as long as they can make it work financially, then that's what they're doing.
Gotcha. I got another one for you since you're doing a lot of expireds. So, and you might not even know the answer to this because maybe they don't tell you, but what seems to be all right, how do I say this? So if I'm an agent and I'm contacting an expired listing, I mean, we just covered the whole gamut of how important relationships are and
Mhm.
so on and so forth. So when you end up getting the expired listing from what is typically another listing from another agent, who's the agent that they worked with in the beginning? That like, did they just call up a random agent? Was it an agent that they had a relationship with that now they're like, yeah, they just can't hack it? Like, what's typically the scenario there?
Yeah, I'll tell you this: most people are loyal to their agent.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would say the majority of them are.
The majority of them tell you no, we're going to
Mhm.
relist with
Mhm. Whenever we decide to do it, we're using this person.
Got it.
And that's great. Like, I actually kind of enjoy hearing that.
Sure.
The other circumstances are, I would say there's probably three. One, the person probably wasn't that experienced to begin with, and however they met them through their friend or referral or however they came about, probably just wasn't the right fit for them.
Okay.
Got out of the business.
No way.
Or they just didn't feel that person was engaged enough. Because here's the thing where, like, I hear this a lot. They were really engaged in the beginning, and then as time went on, the engagement dropped off. Which, okay, I understand. You're on the market for 6 months. You didn't want to drop your price. You didn't want to probably listen to what they were advising you to do. So they also pulled back. Not saying that's the right approach, but that's at least what I hear.
Do you ever make financial investments into your your listings with your clients? Like, if, I don't know, if something needs to be cleaned or anything like that?
Yeah. So I'll talk particularly about people that are going to vacate before we list the home.
Okay.
In these types of circumstances, as soon as they move out, I bring in the cleaning crew. I bring in the staging.
And who pays for that?
That's all me.
Okay.
That's just part of my budget. I've found it so valuable, like staging in particular. And at the beginning, when I first got into this, people were, a little bit hesitant. I don't want to pay for that or whatever. So quickly, I was like, I need to figure out how to do that. Obviously, at the beginning, I didn't necessarily have all the money to start putting out, because that's upfront cost too.
Sure.
So as soon as I got...
So wait, you need to have a budget as a business owner? That's crazy.
Yeah.
Go on.
Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
So as soon as I was able to, I was immediately like, okay, here's how I do this now. You move out. I bring in the cleaners. I bring in the staging. We photo, video, list. So that's all me.
Well, and I bring it up. I kind of knew the answer, but the reason that I bring it up is because I think it's important that real estate agents understand that the majority of the agents that are doing good business on the listing side are investing into that listing financially. I mean, I had another agent on here a couple weeks ago that said the average spend, depending on the purchase price of the property, is they're spending anywhere between $2,000 all the way up to $5,000 of their own money to do what it takes to get that home sold. And so that's just like one of my PSAs for clients that, not clients, but sellers out there that are, talking to people who are listing. It's like, what is your listing agent going to do for you? Because I unfortunately know a lot of other agents that, they stick a sign in there and then they do shitty photos and then they wonder why their listing can't sell. And I think not only is that a bad idea as a business owner, but it's also bad for the business in general, because that is unfortunately what a lot of consumers think agents are doing. And I hate to say it, like, I know good agents that do that, and it's a bummer.
Yeah.
That's a bummer, that are just really good at like icing a deal face to face, and then they're not spending a freaking penny. And then when the thing doesn't sell, they're like, well, you got to drop your price. It's like, wait a second. Like, what can we do to make these photos look better? Like, oh, what? There's a big oil stain on the driveway. Like, let's get that power washed. Just little things like that, So, well,
you have to do something, right? And so my approach, ideally, we're trying to build this strategy. This is a team, right? Like, we're a partnership, sellers and me.
Yeah.
What are we doing to get the home sold? Here's the data. What else can we do?
Sure.
I already said pricing is the most important thing. Presentation, the second most important thing.
Well, and you have a financial interest in when it sells. I mean, why shouldn't you bleed a little bit if the seller's going to bleed?
Right. And I'm not going to bleed, because we're going to do these things and we're going to get the home sold for the price we're asking.
Yep.
And that's a fact in most cases. And I can support that because I look at my days on market and my list to close price ratio, which is about 30 and 99%. So when I take that to a seller, I say, if we do these things, this is the result we're going to have. And I can support that because here's what I'm doing, and this is the results that it produces.
Yeah, you make it make sense.
Yeah.
I get it.
So I make it a no-brainer, and I pay for it. So really, we have nothing to worry about.
Right.
When they live there, It's a little bit trickier, but we
Sure.
figure out something.
Well, there's a lot of bad agents out there. I know I don't need to tell you that, but it sounds like based on everything here, you are not one of them. So again, I want to commend you because I do have these conversations on a very regular basis. And, you know, when the answer is not what you're saying, I kind of just go, oh, all right, cool. So, you know, just kind of let it ride.
What do you do for your clients? Not really anything.
Well, you know, we're gonna post it on the MLS, and you know, we're gonna put it on Facebook. I'm like, oh, so you're gonna like pay for Facebook ads? Well, if the client wants to pay for that, then we'll do something like that. I'm like, okay. What if things need to be clean? They're like, well, you know, we could talk about what the client wants to pay for in terms of a budget. And I'm like, man, all right, cool. Well, I know a lot of agents that are gonna financially invest in, you know, making sure that that listing sells. And it sounds like you're not really doing much. But hey, it's not my business.
Yeah,
right?
and I think that's kind of a red flag.
I would agree.
That's scarcity, right? That person might not have enough business to be able to do those things. Like I said, I was there when I first started out also.
Everybody's got a credit card, man.
Yeah, true.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And if you're
yeah.
confident in what you're just selling, that you can get this done, and that if, like, you know, power washing the stain on the back patio is going to get this home sold, then put your money where your mouth is, right? Like, what's that going to cost? Or shit, just fucking rent a power washer yourself. If you're that broke, you clearly don't have much else going on. You could power wash it yourself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get your paintbrush and get in there.
Exactly. We've got a lot of good agents in the office here that, I mean, literally, you know, Chase Cangelosi is a great example. I mean, that dude is like, you want to talk about sweat equity on his listings and stuff like that. And he does good numbers. He should be paying more people to do things. But I don't know if he likes, I think he's a glutton for punishment. I think he likes the pain, you know, he'll come in here like full of paint and everything. I'm like, oh, I just painted a whole garage door. I'm like, why? Why? He's like, it needed to be done. I'm like, you couldn't hire a painter? He's like, no, I got it done in like 4 hours. Okay, cool. What else do we need to know, George?
My birthday is September 21st.
Oh, okay.
So you could send me a birthday card.
I will make sure of that. I've got it recorded now, so I can definitely do that. What else do clients need to know? Obviously, George, let him list your home. He's going to get it done. He's going to actually financially invest in making sure that it gets sold. Unlike I wouldn't call it the majority, but almost 50% of agents are not spending any money to get these deals sold. And especially in this market right now, which we know it's a buyer's market, buyers definitely have the upper hand, and it is imperative that, you know, you're making these properties as presentable as possible, or you will not get what you want for it, plain and simple.
And again, it's about a relationship. Even if they're moving away, like, why not have a relationship and enjoy the period of time you have working together? Whether that's 30 days or it's 90 or whatever it is, you should enjoy the person that you're hiring and paying a considerable amount of money to do this job. I would want to like them. You know, I don't know about you.
No, I agree. And I think that people on the surface of things don't see the value in that until it's too late. And then you're dealing with somebody you can't stand. And every time you have to make a phone call, you just want to throw up in your mouth. And that's never a good thing.
And I'm sure we're both a bit on that side of it as
oh,
well.
yeah.
Like
I go out of my way to anyone will tell you at my corporate office, you know, there's about 50 branches of Gold Star, and then you've got loan officers underneath. So I'm a branch manager, and any of the branch managers will tell you I'm very quick to fire clients. Professionally, of course, I do it, but, you know, I don't like working with people that I don't like. And so, yeah, because the line that I have coined, and anyone can steal this, but I started it myself. Do you know what the only thing better than making money is?
Tell me.
Making money with your friends.
Okay, yeah.
So when you're making money with people that you enjoy and you like and you can call a friend, that's the only thing better than making money, right?
Yeah.
So
and it's really fun.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. You know, you can high five afterwards and go out for a beer. Outside of that, man, I'm gonna put the word out there. I want buyers agents that are new in the business to start reaching out. You got to start talking to some people, man, because when it starts picking up, you know, you're going to be getting the listings. Who's going to run these buyers?
That's what I'm saying.
Right?
I'm thinking about that now.
Who is going to run these buyers? And then furthermore, you know, buyers, if you have all these listings, who's running the open houses to get said buyers? I mean, there's a lot of meat on those bones there that we're going to need a buy side rep underneath you in no time. I guarantee it.
We do.
All right, man. It's been a pleasure. We got to get you back on here. I tell people it's like coming to the gym. You know, the first one's like getting to know you and doing all the things. And then eventually what we need to do is we'll do a second episode. We'll talk about some industry stuff, some updates and everything along those lines, and continue to produce this content because we want to make sure that when we are Googling George Kalafut,
Yes, you got
that it is on not only all the way through the first page, but into the second page.
That's what we want.
Yeah,
Right?
I'll make it happen.
Good.
All right,
Good.
man.
Well,
I appreciate you.
it. Thank you.
Take it easy.